Good morning, everyone. So we're happy to be here. Thanks for letting us be at the ARC to speak today. So quick background, I won't spend too much time on these slides about Krish and myself, but combined we each have about 25 plus years of experience in industrial automation, MES, and obviously transitioning into obviously OT cybersecurity. Krish, I was lucky to get him back in 2022 as I transitioned over to Kenvue, and he's kind of like my Q from James Bond. He's my guy that knows everything and helps me keep things straight. So one thing about Kenvue, I want to let you know a little bit about our organization. So I've heard the theme here. It's been very important for us in Kenvue that we've gotten that key collaboration between IT and OT. So, kind of branding and commercialization for us is important. So we talk about cyber for operations. I've heard it talked about before. When you say you're from cyber, the sites usually want you to just go away and leave them alone. We're trying to let them know that this is a partnership for us. That Cyber for Operations is actually here to help them because we come from backgrounds in manufacturing and know process, that we know we have to be careful that we don't break things when we come into their sites, and that they know that we know availability is key. So we have to be cognizant of that when we're working with our sites. So we've been able to build that partnership, which took some time, and also took some skills gap analysis to make sure people from IT know a little bit about OT, and people from OT know a little bit about IT, which was a struggle for us. Today we'll give you some background. First of all, I just want to let you all know who Kenvue is, in case you don't know the company. We'll give you a little background, then we'll give you a little bit of update on our Cyber for Operations program, a little bit about our program management, and give you some insights on our capabilities that we're using within Kenvue. So for those of you that don't know, Kenvue was basically a spinoff of Johnson & Johnson. So you're going to probably recognize the products up there. Okay, I was with Johnson & Johnson for a little over 21 years. I was in various roles, started out as a line engineer when I joined in 2002, progressed in roles in automation, MES, moved into people leader roles, and back in 2018, I joined the OT Cybersecurity program at Johnson & Johnson in their MedTech division. In 2022, I moved over to consumer. It was announced shortly after that the spinoff was going to happen. But I was excited and eager to do what needed to be done for the new organization for Kenvue. So join Kenvue. You can see here our purpose is realizing the extraordinary power of everyday care. So if you didn't know before, Johnson & Johnson Consumer is now Kenvue, but you'll recognize all the products. Obviously, we didn't change the branding because if we changed Listerine to be something else, you probably wouldn't have bought Listerine anymore. So we intentionally chose not to change the names that you all know because obviously that would have been detrimental for the company to do that. A little bit of background, obviously, from Kenvue, which was previously J&J Consumer. This is our 2023 data, net trade sales. I'm not going to read all this out, but you can kind of see that we do have a big place now in the consumer business. We are the world's largest pure play consumer health company by revenue. But I won't spend a lot of time on this. I want to get into kind of the heart of what we're here to talk about, which is OT cybersecurity. But again, you can see we do have global presence. A little over 50% of our production outside of North America. And obviously we connect with approximately 1.2 billion people globally in their daily rituals and the moments that matter most. So talking about our Cyber for Operations program, we have a kind of a saying within our group that we still know that OT cyber is still very human dependent. My example there is J&J had a lot of money. They were good at buying capabilities. They were good at buying technology. They weren't so good at making sure that people understood how to use those capabilities. Did they have a process? Did they have the right people in place? Did they have them educated and trained on how to use that technology that's put in place? So our purpose here is to really make sure that we step back a little bit and focus on people and process, because without that, we don't feel like our program can be as successful as it should be. But obviously, we also know, coming from backgrounds in manufacturing, that uptime and security and safety is important for our site. So we have to make sure that we're also engaging with the people at the sites and the key stakeholders. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Krish a little bit here. He's going to talk about a program that we've recently started out on, which is our cyber risk quantification program.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. So again, thanks, Mike, for the flattering introduction. So appreciate it. So we were here last year, and we did a presentation, and we were just getting started with the Cyber for Operations cybersecurity program. So we didn't have a whole lot to share at that point, but we had things in play. And one thing that Mike and I are very keen is we have the luxury, because Kenvue is a fairly new company, right? So even though we have a lot of legacy that we got from Johnson & Johnson in terms of infrastructure, in terms of a lot of the other work processes, but still, we definitely have the opportunity to create the program in the right way. So one of the things that maybe a lot of people can relate to this is we do have a lot of data when it comes to vulnerability and risk assessments. Tons of data, not only from the J&J times, and even from Kenvue. So many risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, maturity assessments, so much data has been done. So reached a point where there is a certain type of assessment fatigue within our company. And so we definitely could see that within the sites. So every time we go and ask for an opportunity to perform an assessment, the question was why? We just did it about a year ago or 2 years ago. What have we done? And so those assessments were fairly aligned with 62443, consequence-based, and things like that. And we prioritized the mitigations. All that was done, but what was happening was it stalled. The needle did not move after that. Because one of the questions the site leadership would ask is, tell me, how do we buy down risk? I know you're telling me I need to deploy this nice shiny object for network segmentation, for monitoring, and so on and so forth, but what is the risk reduction? How much risk can I reduce? And also, I have only X amount of money to spend on cybersecurity for this year. Can you tell me where should I deploy those funds so that I can achieve the risk reduction that we're looking for? So it was very difficult to kind of answer those questions, at least for our environment. And so the leadership started looking into some platforms, some frameworks that can help kind of get us there, right? So this was a model that we are working on. Just started piloting last year. And we're partnering with a company called Hubbard Decision Research, HDR. Basically, they are a process statistical modeling house. And they address risk, not just for cybersecurity, financial, reputation, so on and so forth. But for them, risk is risk. It doesn't change. Only the inputs change, right? So we hired them to help us come up with a model on how can we got so much data on the assessment side, how can we quantify those risks? So this is a model that we are working on. We just piloted last year at one site. And I won't go into too much detail. Definitely feel free to ask the questions on the panel discussion. We'll try to give us as much as we can without sharing the sensitive information. So if you look at the graph, the chart on the side here, so it's pretty simplistic, right? So you have on the y-axis, you have probability of a cybersecurity incident or likelihood. And on the x-axis, what we have is loss exceedance or risk. So the risk is measured in terms of what is the minimum loss that I can expect with a certain likelihood. So the black curve on the very top, right? That's your current risk profile. So the area under that curve, or the weighted average of all the loss exceedance numbers multiplied by the likelihood, that entire curve gives us the annual loss expectancy for that particular site, right? The dashed line is a very important one. That's a risk tolerance. So what is the risk that is acceptable for the site? So for example, the conversation that we have with the site leadership would be, how much can you expect a loss of $1 million once every 5 years? The answer may be yes or no. If the answer is yes, so that means 20% probability that you can have a $200,000 loss a year, right? We convert that everything into an annualized loss, right? So that's how the risk tolerance is generated. Based on that risk tolerance has nothing to do with cybersecurity. So as far as site leadership is concerned, it is purely operational risk. How much downtime can I accept? For example, if I have a certain production line that go down, do I have a safety stock that can buffer me for some time? Or do I have another production line that can take up the slack? So based on those types of rationale, they would give us some numbers in terms of what is acceptable loss. And then there are other conversations, like historically they would say we write off roughly about $1 million every other year. because some of our suppliers don't pay us or whatever, bad debt, whatever. All those types of conversations come into that risk tolerance. So it has really nothing to do with cybersecurity. But that's important. It's all operational risk, right? So we overlay that. And then at the bottom, you see a curve. That's really the goal. Where do you want, how much risk do you want to buy down? So the goal is you want to get below the dashed curve, right? You want the current risk to be below the dashed curve, but it doesn't happen overnight, right? So what this model helps us is to plan the mitigation over years. So we can plan how much we can invest on certain controls in terms of how mature we want to take it to, so that we can buy down that risk down to the bottom curve, right? So I'll leave it there, and definitely we can talk more. This is the bottom one. Cool. So this is just I won't go through all of this in detail. So this is another framework, you may want to call it, that was kind of promoted by Gartner. They called it outcome-driven measures. Nothing fancy here. All it's saying is, when you have control measures in place, you want to also have some clear metrics on how are you measuring its performance, or else there's no point, right? So you can't just deploy a control just for the sake of it. So every control, if you see here, whether it is people, process, or technology, doesn't matter. So you have a governance, you got to identify, and so on, and the NIST categories, right? And each of the control type has a corresponding metric on how we plan to measure the performance. And what this does is, this helps us park the maturity. So when we go and engage with the site on on the maturity of a certain control, how mature is your privilege or remote access, we have a metric that we can use to measure the maturity. Right.
Krish, I'll just interject one thing. The control types you see are what we chose that were important to us.
Yes.
Your model may or may not pick the same control types, but for us in Kenvue, we decided what were the control types that we really cared about that fit in this model.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, I think it was wrong. Yeah, again, now let's go on one important, for example, incident response, planning, and execution, right? The two biggest things for us is mean time to contain the incidents and mean time to close the incidents. Those are the two things that we measure, but there could be similar other metrics that you may want to think about. But every control measure has a metric, right? That's a takeaway here. Okay. And just a quick update on our program management. So basically you have these 6 pillars that we are running our program based on. Some of them are green, so we have a lot of work to do here, but there are a few areas that you see green that we are fairly well advanced. So in terms of, for example, the asset management hardware. So we definitely have made a long strides on that one, because especially with Kenvue, we have a lot of assets that are not on the network. So many air-gapped systems, isolated systems on their own network. So just running an asset management tool centralized doesn't really work, right? So what we did, we collaborated with some of our partners like Rockwell, and they have some services that provide that level of granularity, which just goes and gives us the hardware cabinet level information. It's a lot of legwork. It's not automated by any means, but it is. But the good thing is, in the OT environment, I always tell Mike, the advantage that we have is the hardware platform doesn't change that often. Hardware is fairly, especially for us, it's all validated systems. So we don't change that easily. So a program like this really helped us, and now we continue to maintain it to the best we can. So this is the project that we are looking for, and so on and so forth. Anything else you want to add, Mike?
That's good.
Yeah. So
I'll give an update. We'll give an update now on capabilities. So Krish, I'll hit this first one. And then, so again, just to back up for a second, right? So for us, capabilities, you notice we talk about people and process as part of our capabilities. People and process are key for us. Without them, it doesn't matter what tech we buy, right? So we also talk about people and process when we talk about capabilities. Just a little bit about our governance structure. So, obviously we have our leadership team sponsors, but what I really want to focus on some of this lower level, right? We obviously have enterprise level, we have a SOC, we have a CFC, but then we have what we call as our operational technology cybersecurity program. So if you look on that far right, what's key to us is that linkage to the sites. So at each site, we have what we call a single point of contact, or SPOC. View them as our cyber guardian. They're the person that we look to be the voice for their site. If they see something that doesn't look right, they come to us, they ask for advice. We partner with them to help them through whatever issues they may be having. But we also work very closely with the system owners, the MES process control groups. Why? Because of what was mentioned earlier. If a third-party vendor is coming in and they want to connect to our system, guess what we do? We expect for that system owner to tell us what they're there to do. Why are they coming into our site? Are we making sure they're not bringing something that's a risk into our site? So I heard that as a common theme earlier. We have the same thing in place, and we need to know when someone comes in our site, are they coming into our site and potentially introducing a risk to our site? Common theme. We know that laptops and USB media is a huge threat for us, and we're putting things in place. And you'll see Krish talk about some of that in the upcoming slide about what we're putting into place to mitigate that as best we can. Again, it is still human dependent. So what are we also doing? We're writing SOPs that mandate that our sites use these capabilities. Because why are we doing that? If not, it's a recommendation. It's not a mandate. So I can't just give you a technology and hope you use it. I need to enforce it with policy and spot check the sites. So that's really big for us. The other thing you just heard Chris mention, a big thing for us that we were missing from the beginning, we didn't even know where to start in that HDR model without having a good inventory. So one of the first things we did, and again, as Chris mentioned, we had a great opportunity because we were spinning off from J&J. Guess what we didn't want to do? We were disconnecting our assets from J&J net and attaching them to the Kenvue net. Could I trust that the Kenvue net was going to be clean if I didn't know those assets, if I didn't have a full list and scan them? No, we didn't. So what was our first major lift? Identifying all our assets, and for any assets that were disconnected, standalone, air-gapped, we scanned every one of them. Why? Because we couldn't accept that J&J didn't give us a dirty asset. For us, it was dirty until we proved it was clean. Part of what you heard Chris mention, we partnered very closely with Rockwell Automation with what they call their installed base evaluation. What that let us do was we took our list of spreadsheets we had from engineers when we were spinning off and migrating, and we identified any gaps. We built that into what we call a My Equipment portal. And from there, we were able to have not only a list of our assets from a cybersecurity perspective, we also knew about TLM. Where do we have debt? Where do we have obsolescence that could potentially pose a risk? What we were able to do from that is we also partnered with Rockwell on what they have called their asset optimization plan. It let us look at each of those assets and also understand complexity and criticality. Because I can't just give a plant manager a list and say, this is all your obsolete equipment. They know that, and they know they can't upgrade it all in year one. Maybe it takes year 5 to get there, but we could at least tell them what are your top 5 assets that are your most critical that not only have TLM, but also pose a cybersecurity threat, and is potentially your most complex equipment that you wouldn't want to wait for that particular component to fail, and you don't have a backup line to help you cover that revenue. So again, this was very critical for us. You know, we're just now finishing up our initial baseline for all of our systems, and we're doing this asset optimization plan for our sites. The reason we're doing this as well is it helps our sites plan with data. You heard Chris talk about our HDR model is data-driven. What we want our sites to do for TLM and cybersecurity remediation, we want it to be very data-driven. We don't want to tell them we have a feeling or an opinion that that equipment's at risk. We want to show them with data that they need to be pursuing a remediation effort.
And Mike, right, and as far as the asset list program with Rockwell, right, one thing that has really helped us is very quickly respond in terms of CVE alerts. Yeah. So if a static switch has a certain CVE, it gets pushed to us, but we're able to quickly go go on this database. We have a Power BI tool, and we quickly query it. We at least understand, is any of the sites actually have it installed, yes or no? If it is no, it's not an issue. Immediately, it's closed out. Versus unnecessarily spending a lot of churn, trying to figure out. That usually happens most of the times. It takes very useful resources in the SOC and everywhere else, right? So this really has helped us quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a good point, Krish. We actually went from sometimes having days to find out if we had those assets in our sites to minutes. So it was very, very quick for us to then be able to respond to even CVEs. And the big thing for that, I'll also point out what Chris mentioned, is we didn't want to be crying wolf all the time. Right. We didn't want to go to sites and saying, oh, you need to remediate now because we don't even know if you have in your site or not. We're just asking you to drop everything. This also helps us build trust with our sites who are already busy enough. They're trying to do their day-to-day jobs, and we don't want to even go to them and say, go investigate if you have a CVE risk in your site. We'll say, we've done the investigation, we know you have a CVE risk, and we know how to help you through your mitigation steps. But going to them not with a problem, but with a solution. So that was big for us. So I'll let Krish talk a little bit about technology, and you're going to hear some common themes about what was mentioned earlier. So Krish and I were like, it was so interesting to see that there's a commonality here.
Yeah, so when Leah was talking about some of the vulnerabilities in air gap systems and laptops connecting into the OT network and so on. I was just, smiling with Mike. So you'll probably see some very similar challenges that we have as well. So this is just a build here. So as far as this is just for illustration purposes, so this is definitely not a representation of the Kenvue network. I just want to make that very clear, but very typical of a manufacturing environment, right? So we do have a lot of air gap systems, and they're truly air gap in the sense that they're not connected to a network. However, air gap is only as good in the sense that there is definitely other vectors like USB, right? That USB is always available for file transfer, software updates, and all those different things. So we've had a lot of concerns in terms of malware intrusion through those types of vectors. So we definitely have that to worry about. And then we have other systems that are on a local LAN. So they are on their own network, but still not connected to the broader Kenvue network, but they're still on a network. And what our concern there is, like I think Leah mentioned this one, is our system integrators coming in to do their work, configuration work, and connecting into that network. How do we make sure that their laptop is clean? Right? So we've had some incidents in the past because of that. And then lastly, of course, some of these assets are connected into our network and also have remote access. So that is definitely another big threat vector for us. So as far as the way we have gone about protecting the environment is, these are all off-the-shelf products. Nothing customized here. They're all, you can definitely Google them and learn about them. And as far as the safe port, so that's what we are moving more and more towards a safe port, a kiosk-based solution. So if a system integrator or even a Kenvue user wants to use a USB media, you have to first plug it into the safe port, make sure it is validated before they can move on, right? And this safe port is very strategically located. It's at our guard shack or at their entrance to the site. So that's the first thing that they have to do before they even can enter the site. So we made sure that's well established. And,
one thing I'll point out there, Krish, also for everyone, the big thing about us about this safe port, it also is data-driven. When you scan, that scan is logged into a database. So if we have an incident and we need to go back and investigate who came in, what day, what time, they have to use a user ID and password to log in to do the scan. It makes it very quickly for us to contain where that came from and what systems it may have touched. So we would know if that USB media went to 1 asset to 10 assets.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. And again, so there are a few of us here. The TX1 is, again, it's all, because many of the assets are not on the network, so how do you scan them? And many of them don't even have an antivirus software on them, right? So the TX1 is nothing. It's I think owned by Trend Micro.
Yeah, it was Trend Micro. It's TX1 now, but it's a portable antivirus. So when you have those air gap systems that are OT and you can't be getting a virus update from your IT that you're basically going to go to a management server. You're going to download the latest virus definition to that portable media, which also has secure file transfer, so your engineers can transfer files securely. And then you're going to basically go out and be able to scan any of those air gap systems to see if you have a potential infection. So the other thing we've also done, we've mandated that once a year minimum, our sites scan all their gap systems. So we can also find out if there's a potential that someone circumvented our process to make sure we're scanning before they go connect to a system. But again, it's data-driven. We can tell our leadership right away.
It's an antivirus on a stick, right? Yep. That's all it is. So that's what the TX1 is. And then Salvador technology, that's it's solution for data backup. So bare metal recovery, like we call it. So it is a point-to-point connection. It's a hardware-based solution. It's a RAID disk array that's connected directly to the asset of choice. It would be typically an engineering workstation, a batch server, some of those critical assets that you're worried about. And the recovery is really fast, and you're talking a matter of seconds. It requires very little user intervention, no IT knowledge required, and so on, right? So that's the value proposition there. So that's something that we just started to pilot because there's a lot of concern around ransomware type attacks and how are we set up for recovery, right? So that's where this Cyber technology kind of plays in. And yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. So a good point. Yeah, so right, so we have to work with operations.
Yep.
To make sure that is scheduled and they understand some scan might require a reboot, some, all those, yes, absolutely correct.
We have to work with our plant leadership for scheduled downtime. And it's part of our SOP and their line, and they give us the downtime windows, but you have to have a downtime window.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a change control process. Yep. Absolutely correct, yes. And then quickly, the Defender for IoT is the CyberX product that some of you may be familiar with. Now it's owned by Microsoft. So it is very similar to your Clarity and your Nozomis, so it's the same thing. It's a passive intrusion detection system. So that's, we use that. It's a lot of work to do there in terms of optimization and tuning, but the deployment is in place, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's mature yet, right? So a lot of work to do there. And the OT firewall is our perimeter firewall that protects it against the business and network. And Elicity is our network access control solution. So it is standardized on our enterprise side. And now we are slowly adopting the same solution on the OT network, of course, with a lot of caveats. It has to be planned and made sure that the sites understand what the impact will be and so on and so forth. So it's a very slow process. Actually, we had a use case last year where we tried to do this at one facility and the planning wasn't done properly, and then it was pretty much at a pause because that's important. So we ought to make sure that we do a lot of homework before we start the migration. So it's mostly around, I think Blake was talking about the zero trust, but I wouldn't say it's zero trust, but it is approaching microsegmentation. All we are trying to do here is to restrict east-west traffic. So you got the OT firewall, which restricts our north-south, and we want another solution to restrict the east-west, and that's what Elicity is our way to go. Yeah. Yep. And then, of course, the beyond trust is our remote access, right?
I think we're at time, so I'm going to I'm going to skip these last few slides real quickly. Just want to give out a plug that we are working with our MEXA because one of the voice of customers that we got from our sites again, you give us all these capabilities, but we need better training and better knowledge. So we're working with our MEXA to stand up a training program, working with our global training and education team. So this year we are on a journey very well supported by executive leadership to develop better curriculums for our engineers to empower them to make sure they not only have the capabilities, but they're very comfortable with using those capabilities. So, we'll be partnering very closely with John and Dave from our MEXA on that journey. And again, look ahead, I'll just highlight here, we're continuing our journey. Some of the things you heard about, we'll continue to make sure our OT inventory list is evergreen. We know it's, very important to us that we can't tell our leadership that we have a inventory that's, even a week old. A week old is already too late. So we're already putting in procedures as well to make sure our engineers, as part of their onboarding of a new system, they've got to keep that inventory evergreen. You heard about our target operating model, our CRQ, and again, above all, we're just making sure we're keeping that above site governance and that we're making sure our sites know we're a partner with them and they can come to us. We're here to help them. But we thank you for the time today, and I appreciate being able to present to you all.